The sky broke open above the dry plains, rain finally hammering the earth that hadn't seen water in months. Thunder rolled low and heavy, like the growl of something ancient waking after too long a sleep. The dirt road that cut between the cottonwoods was already turning to mud, sucking at Clara's boots as she stumbled forward, her breath sharp and uneven in her throat. Her shawl clung to her shoulders, soaked through. Every drop that struck her face felt like judgment. Behind her came the sound of hooves, steady, relentless, gaining. She didn't have to look to know who it was. There was only one man who rode like that, as though the world owed him the right of way. When the sound grew too close to bear, she turned. The cowboy drew his horse to a stop a few paces away, rain dripping from the brim of his hat. His name was Luke. He looked carved from the same rock as the mesas behind him, his face shadowed and unreadable. For a moment, neither of them spoke, only the wind moved, rattling the dead grass, scattering the smell of wet leather and dust. "Clara," he said finally, his voice low, rough, edged from years of silence. "You can't just run. Not out here, you'll get yourself killed." She stared at him, chest rising and falling. "I had to," she said. "You think you can fix everything with force, with rope, with fists, with shouting until the world listens. I couldn't stay another night under that roof." His jaw worked, but his eyes stayed cold. He swung down from his horse, boots sinking into the mud. Sometimes force is the only thing that keeps a ranch from falling apart. You wouldn't understand. Clara's eyes flashed. "I understand more than you think. You use it like it's the only language you were ever taught." Luke took a step closer, the rain plastering his hair against his forehead. "Maybe it is." Lightning split the sky, illuminating the space between them. She could see the exhaustion in him then, the tremor in his hands, the ghost of regret behind the hardness in his gaze. He looked like a man trying to hold back a flood with his bare hands. Clara swallowed hard. "You can't keep everything together by breaking what loves you." He opened his mouth, but the words caught somewhere in his chest. The storm howled louder, wrapping them in wind and water. She took a step back. He didn't follow. When she finally turned away, she heard his voice again, quieter this time, swallowed by the rain. "You're right," he said, though she almost didn't catch it. "But I don't know how else to be." The thunder rolled once more, and the rain came harder. The storm had finally broken, but it wasn't just the sky that was coming undone. By morning, the storm had quieted into a soft drizzle. The air smelled of mud and sage, and the sky hung low and gray over the valley. The ranch lay in a kind of half-ruin, fences splintered, the creek swollen, and a few shingles from the barn roof scattered like cards across the yard. Clara woke stiff and cold in the tack room, wrapped in a blanket that smelled faintly of hay and horses. She didn't remember falling asleep, only the long hours before dawn, listening to the wind groan through the rafters and the ghosts of their argument replay in her head. Every word she'd said felt like a stone thrown into still water, ripples she couldn't call back. When she finally stepped outside, the light was thin, silver on the wet fields. She saw Luke before she heard him, alone at the corral, mending a post that the wind had snapped clean in two. His coat was dark with rain, his movements slow and deliberate, as if each swing of the hammer were part of some quiet penance. For a long while she just watched. He was the kind of man who didn't know how to stop working, even when it hurt. There was a strange poetry to the way he moved, measured, controlled, but also something haunted, as though he believed if he stopped moving, he might fall apart completely. She finally walked toward him, boots sinking into the wet earth. "You don't have to do it all by yourself," she said softly. He didn't turn. "I don't know any other way," he said, his voice carrying across the quiet morning. The fence post creaked under his grip. His knuckles were raw from rope and weather, his breath clouding faintly in the chill. She came closer, close enough to see the tension in his shoulders. "There's strength in asking for help, Luke." He gave a bitter laugh under his breath. "Where I come from, asking for help was the first step to getting left behind." Clara hesitated. She reached out, touching his arm. His whole body flinched. Just a small movement, but it felt like the earth shifted beneath them. She didn't pull away. "You don't have to keep proving you're stronger than pain." He finally looked at her. His eyes were pale gray, full of storms even when the sky was calm. "That's all I was ever taught," he said, "to push through, to fight, to hold fast. Force kept me alive. It kept this land alive. I don't know how to stop using it." Her throat tightened. "You're hurting me," she whispered, not because he'd grabbed her or shouted. He hadn't, but because his words carried the weight of a lifetime. He froze, the hammer falling loosely from his hand. For a moment he looked younger, lost. Then his voice came out barely above a breath. "It's the only force I know." Something in her broke at the sound of it. Not anger, but a kind of understanding, sharp and sad all at once. She could see the child he'd once been, the one who'd learned that love was a luxury, that survival was built on hardness. The silence between them deepened until only the rain filled it, tapping gently on the fence rail. She took his hand, not to forgive, not yet, but simply to remind him that gentleness was still possible. He didn't pull away this time. For the first time in years, Luke didn't look like a man trying to hold the world together by himself. He just looked tired, and beneath the tiredness, afraid. They stayed like that for a while, in the gray stillness of the morning. Two people standing among the wreckage of the storm, unsure whether what had been broken between them could be rebuilt. But at least they were standing together. The days that followed carried a fragile kind of quiet. The storm had left behind puddles that mirrored the pale October sky, and the earth, though scarred and heavy, began to breathe again. The air was clean in a way it hadn't been for months, washed of dust and bitterness alike. Clara moved through the house like someone relearning a place she used to know. She mended curtains, scrubbed mud from the porch, hung linens to dry in the weak sun. The work kept her hands busy, but her mind kept wandering. To the look on Luke's face that morning at the corral, the tremor in his voice when he'd said those words, "It's the only force I know." It wasn't a defense anymore. It had sounded like a confession he hadn't realized he'd been carrying for years. Some evenings she saw him out near the pasture, working on the fences or checking the cattle. He didn't say much, and she didn't press him. There was something fragile between them now, like glass being slowly reshaped by heat. Each silence felt less like distance and more like waiting. On the fourth evening, when the sun finally broke through the clouds, she found him by the creek. The water ran higher than usual, foaming white around the rocks, carrying leaves and broken branches downstream. Luke was crouched by the bank, replacing a section of wire fence that had come loose. His hands were steady, his shoulders tense, but there was a different rhythm in him, a quieter one. She approached without a word. He didn't startle. He must have heard her steps in the soft grass. "You were right," he said after a moment, his voice low, almost drowned by the sound of the water. "Force don't fix what's already cracked. It just drives the pieces deeper apart." Clara stood beside him, the breeze lifting a strand of her hair. "You're mending it anyway," she said softly. He gave a small nod. "Some things still need holding together. He paused, jaw working as though the words hurt. "I just don't want to be the kind of man that breaks more than he builds." She watched his hands, big, scarred, the kind of hands that had known work, loss, and silence. Gently, she reached for them, folding them between her own. "You can learn new kinds of strength, Luke. It isn't too late." He met her gaze then. His eyes were softer than she remembered, like the edge of winter thawing into spring. "Maybe you can teach me," he said. The sun slid lower, painting the sky with streaks of gold and ash, blue. The water shimmered, the last of the storm's fury carried away downstream. Somewhere in the distance, the low hum of the cattle mixed with the rustle of the wind through the cottonwoods. For a long time they didn't speak. There was no need. The world around them was quiet, waiting. Luke's thumb brushed against her wrist, tentative and uncertain, like a man testing the shape of something fragile, something he didn't yet trust himself to hold. Clara didn't pull away. She let him learn the touch, slow and careful, until it became something real. The air between them felt different, lighter somehow. Later, as they walked back toward the house, the earth still wet beneath their boots, the scent of wet grass followed them. The ranch was still battered, fences still broken, but the sky above was clear for the first time in weeks. Luke looked at the fields, at the place that had always demanded more of him than he could give, and then at her, the only thing that had ever asked him simply to be. "Guess there's more than one kind of force," he said quietly. Clara smiled faintly. "Yes," she said, "and this one doesn't hurt." They reached the porch as the last light faded, and for the first time in years, Luke didn't feel the weight of the land pressing down on him. The storm had passed, the fences would hold again, and somewhere deep inside, something that had been hard and unyielding had finally begun to soften. And though neither of them said it out loud, both knew their healing would be slow, imperfect, and real. Just like the land itself.